Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at a special time for our WilmingtonBiz Talk. And we had to change gears real quickly a little bit today. I know we were set to talk about the airport's terminal expansion project, but with the announcement and news today of PPD's pending sale deal, we wanted to go ahead and delve into some more about those details. So we invited George Hill, who's an analyst with Deutsche Bank, to come on to today's Biz Talk and use this as an opportunity to really find out a little bit more about what might be driving the deal, as well as a little bit more about Thermo Fisher as a company who is proposing to buy Wilmington-based PPD for $17.4 billion. So before we get started with George, we want to take a quick moment to hear a word from our sponsors, Cape Fear Realtors.
Hello, I'm Ann Gardner, CEO of Cape Fear Realtors. Realtors support this program's efforts to connect our community in meaningful dialogue with actionable insights. Realtors are dedicated professionals who build strong, resilient communities and businesses. Work with someone you can trust. Work with a realtor. Learn more at capefear.realtor.
So as I mentioned, this morning, an announcement came out that Massachusetts-based Thermo Fisher Scientific is looking to acquire PPD, a contract research organization that has grown in Wilmington over the past several decades, for $17.4 billion, as well as assuming $3 billion of its debt as well. So very significant deal, not just for the Wilmington area for obvious reasons, but in the industry in general. So just to start us off a little bit, we have Deutsche Bank analyst George Hill, who has followed PPD pretty closely in the past, but also this space as well in the industry. So it gives us a lot of perspective just locally and nationally on it. George, thanks for joining us today. And if you want to maybe just give us a little of your insight of what you know about Thermo Fisher, as that might not be a well-known name to people who work outside of the health and life sciences space.
Sure, Vicki, and as I like to joke with members in the media and a lot of people in the investment community, Thermo Fisher is probably one of the largest healthcare companies that nobody's ever heard of, particularly if you don't traffic in the healthcare space. Thermo Fisher is one of the largest providers of what we call life science tools, so tools and services to the drug development and other healthcare services communities. They're also a vendor of things to devices to companies, including PPD. Think about everything that a drug developer might buy, from beakers and test tubes to centrifuges and assays and higher tech instruments and tools for the creation of drugs.
And so why do you think PPD was an attractive investment for Thermo Fisher, especially for at this price tag?
Well, PPD had a reputation as being a best-in-class provider of services to the pharmaceutical industry around late-stage drug development. And I guess to keep it out of jargon, PPD did a great job of employing a bunch of people in white lab coats to help drug developers recruit people to participate in clinical trials and administer the clinical trials and collect the data from those clinical trials. So that data could then be reported to the government as part of the drug development process. One of the big trends that you're seeing in this space right now, especially as we come through the COVID environment, is vendors, whether it be on the device side or on the services side, looking to consolidate their offerings, grow what we call their share of wallet inside of their customers, sell more services to the largest drug developers, the Pfizers, the Glaxos of the world, and be able to provide an end-to-end solution as the big drug developers are virtualizing the businesses that they have and trying to move a lot of their fixed costs to variable costs. The drug developers are increasingly focused on what is the intellectual property around the drug development process, as opposed to, do I want to own all the lab services, all the tools, all the devices, all the people who are running around conducting the trials. So Thermo Fisher has this vision of increasingly becoming a one-stop shop for its drug clients, which is why the huge services component that PPD brings is so attractive. And of course, PPD's reputation as being a fantastic provider of these services makes it one of the crown jewel assets and most attractive assets in this space.
And Thermo Fisher CEO Mark Casper did a conference call this morning with analysts and to talk specifically about the proposal, which I should point out they're estimating could close by the end of the year because it's pending regulatory approvals and all the normal things you have to go through for closing. But one thing he did mention, along with what you were just talking about, George, is that consolidation and customers wanting to tighten in their pool of the companies they're working with. I thought it was interesting he mentioned that how that connected in with the COVID-19 work that had been happening in the past year. And we know that PPD had a role in the Moderna clinical trials as well. So can you speak to that either just with this particular example or with the CRO space in general? What happened during COVID that kind of propelled this trend?
I actually think this was a trend that was started back in 2016 with the merger of Quintiles, which was another Carolina-based company, with IMS Health, which was a data services provider in the drug space. And the big issue that drug developers are facing, and it was really brought to a head during the COVID crisis, is speed. It's basically how do you go from either the problem or the concept of drug development to clinical trial recruitment, the administration of the trial, collecting the data and reporting it and having outcomes information as fast as you possibly can. And that has always been a challenge in the drug development space because for regulatory reasons, there's a limited patent life for drugs, so you have a limited window from which you can monetize a drug. But in the case of COVID, just the turnaround time as it related to vaccine work and services was so important. And I think that as Thermo looks forward, the ability to integrate its stack of solutions is going to enable it to offer its customers an option around speed. Like we are your one-stop shop. You don't have to shop for everything. You don't have to get vendors to coordinate. We can provide you a solution soup to nuts as it relates to drug development, whether it's something that's, would seemingly be mission critical, like the COVID vaccine or something, right? So, where the basis, you have the luxury of just being focused on the economics of the business and trying to kind of maximize what is your economic opportunity around a drug molecule or a drug candidate that you have. And I think that was core to the proposition of the Quintiles IMS merger in 2016, and that thesis remains in place today. I would also note that this is not the only large transaction that's going on in this space right now. Icon, which is another large late-stage CRO, is in the process of merging with PRA, where it's basically the number 5 and the number 6 competitors in the late-stage research industry would merge to effectively be number 2 by a revenue basis. We talked, the merge of scaling up started with, in my opinion, with Quintiles and IMS, and now continues with Thermo and PPD.
Do you foresee this trend continuing and that the M&A activity continuing to be this active going forward too?
So I think that's a really interesting question because historically, you haven't seen a lot of horizontal mergers in the late stage clinical research space because it's a labor intensive business and it's a labor intensive business with very expensive labor. You're typically talking doctors and PhDs and lab type people who earn well above your average salary. And the risks of horizontal consolidation in this industry have historically been you would lose some clients who didn't want to see one of their large vendors be distracted, and you would lose people who didn't want to be part of a business combination or saw economic risk as part of the business combination, right? So you'd lose key operating people and you'd lose key clients. There weren't big synergies to be achieved because this isn't a business where you can lay off a bunch of people. So it was kind of like, well, why would you do it? The Quintiles IMS merger was a mating of technology with the services, which was a little bit different, and kind of data science with the services. And then with the Thermo PPD merger is more of a merger of I would call it the hardware and the services, which has a little bit of a different angle to it, which I think has value. The Icon PRA transaction, I think investors are still skeptical. You would see it's interesting that both the synergy target in the Icon PPD and the Icon PRA deal and the synergy target in the Thermo PPD deal, in my mind, is relatively modest. And again, that speaks to this idea that you really can't get rid of the people. There's not a lot of synergies that can be achieved. You need all the academics that you have that are conducting the clinical trial research work. Again, I think the cross-sell opportunity is interesting. I think this deal strikes me as a more compelling proposition than the Icon PRA deal.
So George, since you brought up that idea, the synergy targets that they're going for, and how they're going to achieve these cost savings if the deal goes through and is approved, lots of good opportunity to let's take it back local again. So PPD has 26,000 employees, but that's around the country from here to China, global offices, labs that they've been building in recent years. In Wilmington, which represents really a fraction of that, it's estimated about 1,800 employees here locally. However, for the Cape Fear region, that's a very important workforce size, 1,800 people, not to mention having a corporate and public company headquartered here and everything that goes around with it. I mentioned the call this morning. Mark Casper and the other execs from Thermo did not specifically talk about the future of the Wilmington site and its footprint. They did mention some things about the PPD employees and what they'll see in the future, and even execs such as David Simmons. And all those comments will be included in our coverage today in our afternoon story. But without knowing yet too much of the details about the future of Wilmington, as we look here from the outside, I'm just curious what your thoughts might be, since you have known PPD for so well. What would you speculate that, excuse me, that might happen?
So again, when you think of the synergy targets that have been outlined in the release and in the presentation, I think of them as relatively modest. I would expect, again, that number to me represents very modest administrative savings, kind of very modest public company cost savings. They're not huge synergy targets. I would expect that as it relates to the Wilmington area, all of the academic type work and all of the research type work is probably very safe. Anything that would be considered customer facing from a jobs perspective is probably very safe. There's probably some administrative and some executive redundancies that are typically eliminated as part of business consolidations like this. I would suspect that the risk to jobs from a numbers perspective, I would expect is probably very modest. But I call it non-zero, but not. I wouldn't expect it to be a big number.
Okay. And in our final minute here to have this conversation, I just wanted to, I guess, look at it from PPD's point of view. We talked earlier about what this deal would benefit or how it would help Thermo Fisher in its long-term plans and filling out its full service array. So when you look at the deal and what it might mean for PPD, what do you see the benefit being on their end?
I'll say, well, first, it's hard to ignore that PPD shareholders are being handsomely rewarded today. So the stock price is basically up almost 25% over 2 days from a valuation perspective. If the stock were trading at this price X the deal, it would clearly be the most stock in the security universe. I think that what PPD gets is kind of a market expanding story. I'm sure that Thermo Fisher probably touches a bunch of companies that PPD might not yet have relationships with yet. So I would say it becomes a door opener at both ends, where PPD will have the opportunity to touch new customers that it probably hasn't touched before. Thermo will likely have a similar opportunity. And how you see a lot of these deals play out over time is that the companies will look to bundle the solutions and the services components of what they sell, again, to try to take share away from other competitors in the space.
All right, great. Thanks very much. George Hill from Deutsche Bank. I want to appreciate you spending the time and breaking down some of the details of this deal. As I mentioned earlier, of course, we'll have coverage of it in our afternoon email today at 4, as well as ongoing coverage as we talk to other people in the industry, as well as local business community about their thoughts on it in the coming days. So thank you for joining in, and we will be back here again next Thursday talking about the challenges of finding an available workforce as we go into the summer tourism season and what impacts that has on our hospitality industry. And then the airport terminal project check-in that we had planned to do today, we will be doing that the following week on Wednesday, April 28th. So thank you very much for tuning in this special time, and we will be talking to you again soon. Have a great day.